I am alone during the day. I am alone during the night, and no ray of light comes to shine upon me. These words are not yours, but they could be. The one who wrote them was Saint Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. Not in a sermon, not in a book, in a private letter that was never meant to be revealed to the world. Between 1910 and 1922, Saint Padre Pio wrote hundreds of letters to Father Agostino of San Marco in Lamis, his spiritual director, the only man authorized to hear what was happening inside his soul. He wrote out of religious obedience, confessing everything, and what he confessed was a desert with no end. The bitterness I feel in my soul is extreme. I am wounded to death. I am alone in combat day and night, without a single moment of truce. My heart is torn apart, reduced to shreds. In another letter, he wrote, "My Father, when will the sun shine in the sky of my soul? Woe is me. I find myself lost in the deep and vast night through which I pass. And in yet another, perhaps the most painful of all, shall I die then, without ever having loved my God?" This is the Padre Pio no one ever showed you, not the saint of miracles, not the mystic of visions, the saint who felt that God had abandoned him. And if you are listening to this right now and felt something tighten in your chest, it's because these letters were not written only for Father Agostino. They were written for you too. You just don't know why yet. In the letters of Saint Padre Pio, there is a pattern that repeats in almost all of them. Before describing the darkness, he describes what he tried to do to escape it. And it is exactly what you do too. When you pray and feel nothing, the first thing that comes to mind is, I must be doing something wrong. You try to pray more, with more faith, with more strength, and the silence continues, and God's presence feels distant. So you change your strategy. You make promises, seek novenas, switch prayers, and nothing. And that is where the real problem begins. It is not the silence of God itself. It is what you begin to believe because of the silence. That God grew tired of you, that your faith is too weak, that you do not deserve to be heard, that others feel God, and you don't, because something in you is broken, is wrong. This is the lie, and it is as subtle as the very silence you feel. Because the problem was never your prayer. The problem was never your faith. The problem is that no one ever explained to you what God's silence truly works in your soul. And Saint Padre Pio knows exactly the meaning of this silence, because he lived it for years, not for days, not for weeks, years. And in one of those letters, he wrote a sentence that contradicts everything you have just heard about spiritual abandonment. The whole world knows Saint Padre Pio as the Friar of Miracles, the man who read souls in the confessional, who healed the sick, who carried in his body the 5 wounds of Christ for 50 years. But almost no one knows the saint who wrote letters alone in his room, with his hands bleeding, begging to understand why God seemed to have abandoned him. In one of those letters to Father Agostino, he wrote, "It seems to me that I am always seeking something I cannot find, and I do not even know what this thing is that I continuously seek. Love, suffer." He was seeking God, and God did not answer, not for a day, not for a week, for years. In another letter, he writes from the depths of his soul, "I desire nothing else but either to die or to love God, either death or love, For life without this love is worse than death. Worse than death. A saint said that. This is Saint Padre Pio. The same saint the whole world sought for miracles was alone, writing that he would rather die than live without feeling the love of God. Perhaps you have never heard this. Perhaps the image you had of Padre Pio was of a mystic saint, with bandaged hands, with visions, bilocation, and complete union with God. The truth is different. He prayed and felt nothing. He sought and found nothing. He loved and received no answer. Exactly like you right now. And it was in the middle of this interior desert that Saint Padre Pio wrote a sentence no one would expect from a saint so shattered. In one of those same letters, Saint Padre Pio said, "It is true that Jesus often hides himself, but what does it matter? Having his assurance that I am not abandoned, but merely being played with by love." Yes, you heard that right. Played with by love. Saint Padre Pio did not say the pain was an illusion. He did not say the silence did not exist. He said the silence had an author, and the author was not abandonment. It was Jesus himself. This contradicts everything you believed about spiritual dryness, because human logic works like this. If I pray and feel God, he is present. If I pray and feel nothing, he is gone. But there comes a moment in the spiritual life when God withdraws the feeling of his presence on purpose, not as punishment, not as rejection, not because you did something wrong, but because he is preparing you for a love that does not depend on what you feel. The tradition of the Church calls this the dark night of the soul. St. John of the Cross, another great saint and doctor of the Church, described this process centuries before St. Padre Pio. It is the moment when God purifies your faith. Think with me. When you felt the presence of God strongly in prayer, were you praying because of God or because of what you felt? That is the question that hurts, because the honest answer for almost everyone is, I prayed because it made me feel good. I sought God because the feeling was good. I loved the presence more than the God who was present. And God, who knows you better than you imagine, removes the feeling of presence to teach you to love him, and not what he makes you feel. It is not that Jesus left. It is that he stopped giving you the appetizer to prepare you for the banquet of the Lamb. Do you see what happened with Padre Pio? The saint who felt abandoned by God did not stop loving. The saint who felt nothing kept desiring everything. The saint who lived in total darkness refused to let go of God's hand. And that is exactly what God is waiting for from you, because it is in the darkness, where you have nothing to lean on, that faith stops being a feeling and becomes a decision. Saint Padre Pio did not merely survive the dark night. He discovered, inside it, the place where Jesus had been hidden all along. While Saint Padre Pio was writing those letters, saying he could not find God anywhere, every morning he would rise, put on the sacred vestments, and celebrate Holy Mass. Every morning, the saint who said he could not feel God held God in his own hands. The same Saint of Pietrelcina who wrote, I am alone, day and night, without a single ray of light, stood before the Eucharist every day. He held the body of Christ with the same hands that bled the wounds of Jesus, and he did not feel the presence of God, but he knew that Jesus was there. even without feeling it. He knew that the Eucharist does not depend on your emotion to be real presence. He knew that the presence of God does not need to be felt to exist, and that is what saved and deepened his faith even further. It was not an ecstasy. It was not a vision. It was not an answer in the middle of prayer. It was the decision to remain before a hidden God. Saint Padre Pio once said, "In the Eucharist, there is the same Jesus Christ who is in heaven and who was born on earth of the Virgin Mary. The same, not a memory, not a symbol. The same Jesus. Hidden in the most silent form possible, in a piece of bread on the altar. No radiance, no voice, no spectacle, only presence, real, under the form of bread and wine. Perhaps God is not distant. Perhaps he is hidden in the simplest place and closest to you. Perhaps what you have been seeking for months, for years, has been waiting for you in silence, in the same place where it has always been, because that is what the Eucharist is, the place where Jesus chose to hide in plain sight, where he does not shout, does not appear, does not impose himself. He simply waits for his children to come to him. Saint Padre Pio understood that the dark night was not God moving away from him. It was God teaching him to find him where he truly is, not in feeling, not in emotion, not in consolation, but in the sacrament, in the altar, in the silence of the tabernacle. Padre Pio used to say that during Holy Mass, he saw Our Lady present at the altar. Every morning, even on the darkest days, even on the days when he felt absolutely nothing, the Mother was there and the Son was there. Two presences, two silences, no feeling, and yet, Saint Padre Pio did not leave. He did not abandon the Mass. He did not abandon the altar. He did not abandon the one who seemed to have abandoned him. And he did this for years, without feeling, without understanding, without receiving any explanation, just a decision, repeated every single day, in the dark. This raises a question you may have never asked yourself. If God has not abandoned you, if he is only hidden and not absent, then what does he want from you now? What do you do when you have understood that the silence is not rejection, but you still do not know what the next step is? This is the question that remains. After you understand that the silence is not abandonment, if God is here, why does he not speak? If he has not rejected me, what does he expect from me? What do I do now? Feeling nothing? Hearing nothing? Saint Padre Pio answered this question, not with a theory, with his own practical life of faith. In the darkest years of his spiritual night, he received no answer from heaven, no vision, no voice, no consolation. But he did something that most people do not do when God seems to be silent. He remained faithful. He stayed in prayer, even without feeling. He stayed at Mass, even without understanding. He stayed before the Blessed Sacrament, even when the abandonment felt unbearable. And during that time, he wrote one of the most honest prayers a saint has ever written. Not a beautiful prayer from a book, not a prayer of ecstasy, a prayer from someone who is in the dark and refuses to let go of God's hand. He wrote, "Stay with me, Lord, for I need your presence so as not to forget you. Stay with me, Lord, for I am weak and I need your strength. Stay with me, Lord, for it is night and I need your light." Do you see what the saint is doing? He's not saying, God, give me a sign. He's not asking for a feeling of presence. He's asking for one thing only. Stay with me, Lord. And that is the secret Padre Pio discovered inside the spiritual dryness. What God wants from you in this desert is not a more perfect prayer, not more effort, not more promises, not more guilt. It is faithfulness. To remain when everything inside you wants to give up and walk away. The Saint of Pietrelcina taught that. On the days when the heart feels distant from God, keeping the habit of prayer is worth more than seeking immediate consolation. And this consoles the very heart of God when a child remains in prayer even without feeling Him. He sees you there, faithful, seeking, even without finding Him. When you pray and feel God, that is consolation. When you pray and feel nothing and keep praying, that is love. That is mature faith. And that is the love that purifies. The love that God is building inside you, in this silence that feels empty. And this love has a concrete place, the Blessed Sacrament. Not the Mass, although the Mass is the center of everything. But that moment, when the consecrated host is exposed and you can remain before the presence of Jesus, face to face. No words, no liturgy, no obligation, just you and Him. In adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, you do not need to feel anything. You do not need to say anything. You do not need to understand anything. You only need to be there, because Jesus is there, real, present, whole, waiting for you in the same silence you mistook for absence. Saint Padre Pio spent hours before the Blessed Sacrament, not because he felt great things, but because he knew that being before Christ, even in the dark night, was already prayer, was already love, was already an answer. And perhaps this is the answer you have been waiting for. Not a voice from heaven, not an extraordinary sign, but a simple invitation. Stay. Remain in the presence of God, even if you do not feel the Lord present. After living years in this darkness, after writing desperate letters to his spiritual director, after celebrating entire masses without feeling anything, Saint Padre Pio began receiving people who felt the very same thing. Spiritual children, people who came to him saying, "Father, I no longer feel God. I think He has abandoned me." And do you know what he would say? He would say, "You must not allow yourself to think that Jesus has abandoned you. This is a lie. So leave it with the father of lies." And then he would add, "The anguishing fear of having lost Him is the certain evidence that He dwells within you." Let that sentence sink in slowly. The fear of having lost God is the proof that He is inside you. Because those who do not have God do not miss Him. Those who were truly abandoned do not weep over it. Those who truly lost their faith do not watch a video like this. The fact that you are here right now, listening to this, with this weight in your chest, with this longing you cannot explain, that is the proof. Even Saint Padre Pio, the saint who carried Christ in his own body, went through this very same darkness. Even he wrote letters of despair. Even he asked if God had abandoned him. Even he wept without an answer. And God did not abandon him. And if God did not abandon the Saint of Pietrelcina in the darkest night, He will not abandon you in yours. The next time you kneel to pray and feel nothing, Remember these letters. Remember that the most beloved saint of the 20th century felt exactly what you feel. And he did not stop. He did not stop praying. He did not stop going to Mass. He did not stop standing before the Blessed Sacrament. He did not stop saying, every single day, "Stay with me, Lord." And God made himself present. He always stays. If this letter from St. Padre Pio touched you in some way, stay with us. Subscribe to the channel, because every week we dive into the wisdom of the saints to heal spiritual wounds in a deep and sincere way. God is faithful. His presence is with you, even if you do not feel it. Not feeling God is temporary, but His presence has never stopped being real.